and does not need any introduction. A couple of assumptions I made before this session because we wanted to cover a lot of ground on demonstrations. We are not going to detail of all these things which whoever is in this integration area or in this Mulesoft space probably are already familiar with. Feel free to stop me if something seems not very common to you and you're losing track of certain things just because these things are not something you have recently worked with or aware in past. To talk about, we will be talking about some APIs. They will be mostly REST, and we will be testing them through different scenarios, applying policies around them. Mostly they are JSON, but mostly people who know JSON knows XML as well. This is one area where we definitely will be doing back and forth between the point platform, which is Cloud Hub. We call it too. It's a hosted solution by Mulesoft. So this is where we will be, going there. Something like Design Center. This is the place where we do, create YAML, and then we have Anypoint Manager where we go and apply policies. We export our stuff to assets, and then the Runtime Manager where we deploy applications. Anybody have questions on this slide particularly, because otherwise we'll be getting too much deeper in details where you might have just missed some of these things.
Why YAML?
Why YAML?
Yes.
So YAML is a standard which is developed by Mulesoft. It's a REST API, markup language. There is a parallel standard Swagger as well, which is Open API Spec. Now, Mulesoft still supports OAS, which is Swagger, but they still do YAML. So this is pretty much what we will be using in our current session. But yes, if you want to do OAS, the platform does support that.
Thank you.
Any more questions? All right. Let's get into details. So typically, a life cycle of Mulesoft development is you're required to host some APIs. If given you are talking about API-based development, you might be doing orchestration as well. But since we are focusing on security and specific to APIs, you will be requested to host some APIs, and then the way Mulesoft recommends it, you host them, basically mock them, you take customer feedback, make certain changes in the maybe the structure, request response, resources, all that, and then eventually you build the solution. Once you do that solution, you deploy it in Cloud Hub, or maybe you're hosted your own on-premise solution, but everything happens on Mule runtime. Once that happens, then you have to come back to API Manager to protect these APIs, to protect these platforms, these APIs from people who should not have access to these APIs, some bad actors too. So this security is just focusing on that. We're not talking about two-way SSL. We're not talking about any other kind of security. We're just talking about the APIs and how we can protect them. In API Manager, if you have seen, these APIs are under different categories. First of all, these policies, which in API Manager are, there are basically three kinds of policies. You have default policies, which Mulesoft provides out of the box. Then you have policies which are custom, which in certain cases you don't get what the policies come out of the box. So you want to do some additional logic of your own, which we will see in a bit once we are towards the end of this session, how to develop custom policies. You can do that. And they have something called automated policy. I have not seen many people using it, but it's a good way of making sure that every time you deploy certain APIs, these policies are automatically implemented. So you don't have to worry about 10 people having access to your platform, but what if all of them are not protecting those APIs? So you can go ahead and apply these automated policies as well. In the default policy section, we have security, the prime focus of this session, but they have other policies for quality of services, some troubleshooting, some policies for compliance, like client ID enforcement and all those policies. So they're all out there in case you want to try some of them. That's one way you can go and apply these policies. All right, so getting into the security policy, There are quite a few. Mule 3 gave some, Mule 4 gave some more. These are the common ones which I listed. Obviously, we can't cover all of them, but some of the policies which came with Mule 4 are not that popular, but some of them which was already there in Mule 3, policies like basic auth, simple authentication, LDAP, we're going to see in demo today. Policies like JSON XML thread protection, where you apply these policies against, let's say, incoming XML, and you define that this is the maximum node depth. These are the things you don't want to see in your JSON data on the key value pair or on the total length of the input payload. All these threats which eventually can overload your API, you can put these policies there to protect it. Then you have the ones for IP whitelisting and blacklisting. Pretty much what it means is you want certain people to come and talk to you, just you whitelist those IPs, and then no one else can reach these APIs, and you can go the other way around too. We're going to talk about Jwt validation later today. Again, JWT is a certain format in which you can transfer some access tokens. I'm not touching too much now because we have a complete demo session on OAuth 2 and JWT validations. One more thing, if you want to stop me anytime you have questions, feel free to do it. That way we are not going too fast. All right, so the next piece is auto discovery. Just a quick show of hands, how many people have used auto discovery? Just curious.
Not in Mule though.
Okay, well, it seems like it's not that popular. So, because this session, I will be doing some demo as well for auto discovery, but I wanted to know how many people used it and how many people are familiar with the internal workflow of auto discovery.
Could you describe auto discovery for someone that's not familiar with what you're trying to say, really?
Yeah, so the concept is this. You have an API where you have configured this API through API Manager, and then you have a code which is expecting that API to be, that policy to be configured for that code. So you have two different pieces, and it's better to show it in the picture. So whatever code you have, you deploy your code in the Mule runtime as a backend API. Let's say we want to protect this API. And then through API Manager, and actually I should go with the steps. So step one is your administrator come and apply a policy. It could be a simple basic auth policy. Now, once the policy gets applied and the code is deployed in your step two, these two things need to tie together. This time happens through your auto discovery. So what happens is based on the name, the API name and its version, this API Manager ships that policy to your API gateway, which sits in pretty much Mule runtime. That API policy is now part of this API gateway, and any user who wants to access this API needs to comply to this policy, whatever the policy is for. So that's what auto discovery does. It helps you to pair between whatever is configured here to the backend API, and so that these two can work in sync. All right. So next one is actually a demo session on what is happening inside API auto discovery. And I need to do a little back and forth between my Anypoint Studio and API Manager. So I have a simple API which is built here. This API basically locks the incoming message, nothing else. The intent is to show how API auto discovery works behind the scene. The reason I could not do it in Cloud Hub is because we won't be able to see things which we can see in our local machine. So I'm running this API in my local machine, and then if I go to API Manager, so this is the part where this API is managed via simple basic auth protection. If you know this, if you have done this configuration in past, you have to create a security manager first with the username and password, and then you actually apply the basic auth policy to it. So it's pretty simple configuration, but this is how it is done. The focus is not to show you how basic auth is enabled, but something else, which is auto discovery, which is happening in this case. So currently this API is running, and the policies are configured. If I go back to the piece where I hit the API, which I just did, so you will see some entries over here saying the API received a request, which is 6:15. What I wanted to show you was not this, basically a folder called policies, which is pretty much in your workspace, .mule folder and policies under it. So the policy which is configured with this ID in my API manager So this policy is actually over here on my local machine, and the exact same thing happens in Cloud Hub as well due to auto discovery. And all these policy details are shipped to your local machine if you run this through auto discovery. So this is a username, this is a password I configured, and now this is part of my Mule runtime as I was showing in the previous picture to protect the API against anybody who's coming in. So if I go and change the password to something which is not part of my basic auth, this will reject that particular request. So that's how this auto discovery things work behind the scene. By shipping the policy to your environment, Mule runtime, which could be Cloud Hub, which could be your on-premise machine, or it could be like the way it is happening in local machine. And then it stays there. Every time you make a change in your API manager and go and update the policy, you definitely see a log entry saying the policy is updated. It takes a second or two to get updated, but that's what happens behind the scene. Any questions on auto discovery?
So could you go back to the XML for a moment that you showed? Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm just noting that it's a clear password. Is there a way that you can at least encrypt on the server so that you're not looking at a clear password?
Well, this is in Cloud Hub, so you don't have access to this location at all. This is why, because I'm running it in local machine. But when you run it in cloud, let's say you do it in Cloud Hub, you don't have access to these locations at all. So
Okay.
you won't be able to see that. The reason I'm doing it here because I wanted to show you what is happening behind the scene.
Okay.
But it's a plain text, yes.
Okay, thank you.
All right. So the next piece which I'll be talking about is some additional information which I want to do for this one, where I have an API which is public, non-protected API. I was just looking for something which is non-protected. I found one. And the idea is to see if we can protect it using some authentication. I used a basic auth, but definitely can do anything you want. It could be another team within your office which want to protect an API with, let's say, OAuth or something, and they don't have capability because they haven't started using all these new technologies. It could be some other reasons why you want to protect someone else's API. But the whole idea is you have capability in API manager to deploy a proxy and protect some external API. So this is what is important in this particular case. When you configure an API manager for a particular API, you get two options. You basically can do just a basic endpoint. You configure that, or you can also do endpoint with proxy. This particular piece, which we are talking about for external API, is where we are doing endpoint with proxy. If you have a Mule application built in, an API, you don't need that thing to be deployed with endpoint with proxy. You can, but you don't have to. You just simply go with basic endpoint, configure that endpoint, and eventually that particular API, which is somewhere here, it comes here, and if you notice there is just one Mule runtime. So in this case, you have two different Mule code working, one for your backend API, and the other one is for the proxy API, which we're going to see in a bit how that is configured. But that's where you have to burn some additional worker to deploy a proxy. And if you have a Mule code, you don't have to burn additional worker because you already have a Mule worker configured for that. So that's something you need to look after, that whether you want to shell out that additional worker to do a proxy. But again, that's what gives you a capability of protecting that API. So let me kind of show you what's basically happening here. So I will basically do a couple of things. I will test, without policy. I will test with policy, do some negative testing, and then at the last I will go with the policy configuration to show you what is happening. But in this case, it's just a basic auth policy, so it's going to be very quick. So the API which I found online was an API for numbers, where if you enter today's date and you call this API, you get a past event happened on that day. And if you notice, there is no authorization, nothing. You just keep on hitting, you keep on getting more information about that particular day. The one which is hosted in Mulesoft, and if you notice the URL, it says cloudhub.io. So this is the URL which is protecting this, again, with simple basic auth. And if I hit that, I'm able to get the same result, but I have to give a correct credentials. If I don't give the right password, though the backend API is not protected, this authentication will fail me because I have deployed a proxy to do that. In the CloudHub configuration, the way things are set up is it basically, you have to go to manage API from Exchange, and then you say the name of the RAMBL which you want to deploy, and then you say endpoint with proxy. I'm not doing it because I've already done it, but this is pretty much what you do to deploy a proxy on CloudHub. So you save this configuration. You have to give some implementation URI if you want to do a proxy. Test, and then you save that configuration. It's actually the URI of your API, so it has to be the complete URI. And then you have to give your runtime where you want to deploy this proxy with some name. And then the deployment happens. I'm not doing it now since I already have a proxy deployed. The configuration are pretty simple here. Since this is deployed in Mule 4, and Mule 4 has done some things simple on these policy side. So if you have remember, in Mule 3 you have to do a security manager first to apply a basic auth. This is not that difficult. It's pretty much you have one basic authentication policy. You configure details here, and you're good to go. So that's all about how you can secure an external API via a proxy in Mulesoft. Any questions around this?
They're not using the runtime, we're just using the API manager. Is there any cost associated?
Yes, you have to deploy that proxy in a worker. So definitely you have to burn 0.1 vcode for the proxy. So you have to have deployed something. If you remember this picture.
But I don't have any code for that to deploy.
No, you don't have to. The code is everything. Mulesoft takes care of it. You just deploy the proxy, which is pretty much what Mulesoft configures for you. Now you can download the proxy and then you can make some tweaking if you want, but you don't have to code for it. It's just a 5-minute thing where you deploy a proxy and you put up some policy on top of it and say, okay, well, now it is protected.
So can I protect multiple APIs as part of the one proxy, giving multiple resources?
You can protect an API with multiple resources, but not multiple APIs. It's just that one API that you kind of protect it.
So I have an API which was not developed in Mule or Mule runtime agent. So we have a Java backend API. How I can protect that API in API manager?
That's pretty much what the demo was.
But here it is showing the backend API has to run in Mule time runtime agents, right?
No, it doesn't have to. So the proxy is what you are deploying. Now this proxy can, like even in the example, it's a numbers API which I have no clue which platform it was built on. It could be Java, it could be .NET, or who knows. It doesn't have to, but you do need a proxy to deploy in Mule runtime that knows that, okay, if API manager sends me a policy, I know how to protect it, and then I will route that request to the either external or internal API. So that's up to this proxy to decide where it wants to route that request. But that external API, it doesn't matter, it's just an API for it.
How will we configure that external API in the API manager?
You mean how it is routing the request?
Yeah.
Okay, I see what you're saying.
Yeah, the configuration where it is tied up to that URL.
You see that? This is the implementation where you actually API is implemented. Now you can always give a Mulesoft developed API here as well as an implementation, but that's your call.
And where do we configure the buffer size in API?
Okay, so that is by default. If I go here in runtime and show you the secured part, it always takes 0.1 before. It's by default takes it.
If you want, you can probably adjust it.
Yeah, you can, but it knows that it's a pretty lightweight configuration, but you definitely have to burn 0.1 vCore, which might get expensive if you're in cloud, so you need to be mindful of that.
But technically, still the external API is unsecured. Anybody
Yes,
can.
of course. Anybody can access, but typically the use case will be, let's say you have an internal API where others cannot access, and this is pretty much within your VPN where no one else can access, but a situation comes where you have to give access to others. So in that use case, you don't want to open it for everybody. You want to protect it by something. So this proxy can help you. It's a similar setup which other API management like APG and other things do the same way.
Basically a privilege-based access.
Yeah. And you can even do it protected using JWT policy or OAuth policy too. So as long as no one from internal has access to that, you can just protect it.
Can we change the request? Let's say I want to expose SOAP as a REST. Can I do this?
That can be done, but what you have to do is, in that case, is you go back here.
So are you trying to limit the size of the payload by converting it from SOAP to, let's say, JSON is what you're trying to do?
So let's say my consumers are like JSON. So I just want to give JSON options instead of rewriting my code, supporting both SOAP and REST. So instead of, I will just use this proxy, expose it as a REST also.
So the way you can do it is you can download those jars. So whatever these proxies are created, you can simply download those jars. And then you can use those jars and tweak them to do that SOAP to REST, REST to SOAP. You can also write a custom policy which has the capability of converging. So we will see the custom policy a little bit later, but if you can cite that logic in Mulesoft of taking a SOAP message and converting it to REST, you can embed that logic within the custom policy and apply on top of that proxy. So that's how you can see that.
Does the SOAP not require a SOAP envelope? Will that change the data format? I don't think this would be the right. I don't think this
So
would be
instead
the
of writing like a develop another Mule application,
yeah.
I just want to expose just using this policy.
Yeah, that's why I'm saying the input model would be different for SOAP and REST, right? So this might not be able to.
Well, the thing is like when you're doing things like this, okay, let's say you're just using a straight SOAP message with no header information for transaction. You essentially are still doing a request and a response with XML, and unfortunately you have a SOAP body around it, yes, but it's still REST. It is a request response.
Yeah. I
So,
want request body also to be JSON.
well, that's when you're converting XML to JSON then. Therefore, you have to strip the body, you have to strip the XML.
Yeah.
And it's easier to do it in, let's say you're doing Java, it's easier just to open up another, at the point where you're doing a SOAP call, you just create one more API call, just another signature in Java that says JSON and call it a day. It's faster to do it there than to actually do the conversion from XML to JSON. Depends on what you have control over.
This might not be the right.
No, because RPG you have like similar capabilities.
Okay.
Yeah, you can download those jars and then you can tweak things if you want. I mean, there's absolutely nothing which stops you from downloading those jars and uploading back again. There's a proxy pre-configured for you for some basic scenarios. Anything more than that, you're welcome to do that.
Is there any way, like, without deploying that 0.1b code, can we do it way the proxy?
No, you can't. You definitely have to burn 0.1 to have something, because otherwise API manager does not know how to talk to that backend API. This proxy gives you capability where API manager knows how to talk to that, and that proxy simply knows how to route the request. There's no other way you can do a workaround of that.
Maybe that may be the limitation of
Yeah.
Because it's a cost way, just one core,
Yeah.
find one core also costly. Configure this like.
Well, here's the thing, I mean, other solutions, if you don't have other solutions in your environment, it's not that expensive given that you are protecting now a non-protected API which might have gone built into a legacy system. If you have other options like, Azure API Gateway, FPG API Gateway, then you might have to think which one is cheaper. I mean, getting a license for 5 APIs doesn't make sense. Then you may want to go this route.
The ideal goal is like use Mulesoft for that.
Yeah, yeah, right. So
leverage so much code, just like Vinay, question.
the platform provides you an ability to build a proxy and deploy like other API gateway platforms as well. But yeah, if there's no way you can avoid that 0.1b core of that.
This approach might be of more value addition if the proxy that we just deployed supports more than one URL at a given point in time.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So, anyway, we are going to be spending a 0.1 core over there. So if I'm able to support more than one service with the same proxy, it might help.
I think, and I haven't done it myself, but what I think you can do is you can build a wrapper and let that request come to that wrapper from proxy, and internally let it route to multiple packets. Because again, you can download the jar and play around, so you can sort of route it to multiple destinations if you want. Now, making it too heavy might need a 0.1 more, like 0.2 core. Again, that's something you will run and see how much load it can handle.
Of course.
Right, so that's what the cache is. All right, let's talk about OAuth now. So anybody, I don't know how many people have heard of that. Anyone who has not heard of OAuth? Okay, seems like everybody's familiar about it. So this is just a quick recap of, if you have already known OAuth and might have used as well, on what is happening in the OAuth protocol. This is what they refer as OAuth dance, where you have a client app that needs an access to a backend API, but it cannot just go and do it right away. It has to go through certain steps. The initial step is you have to go to something called Authorization Server, which in the example I'm using is Auth0. You can use Azure, Okta, and a few other authorization servers out there to get the OAuth token. So step one, you send some credentials, which includes your client ID, secret, and then your grant type, which for machine to machine, you typically select client credentials, and then the particular resource which you want to access, which is audience, you call it by audience over here. So you give all these details, and the authorization server returns you a Jwt token, JWT token, which is JSON Web Token, also referred as Jwt token. So what you get back is a Jwt token. Now, in next step, what you do is you present that Jwt token to your API gateway and say, hey, can you give me access to this particular resource? This is my bearer token for accessing. What this API gateway does is it goes back to your authorization server, look for its signatures, all the available signatures which it supports. Again, and we will see in detail that how it knows and all those things in the demo, but it basically goes back to a URL, get these Jwt token validated to make sure it is not tampered, to make sure it has all the right permissions. We will also see that Jwt token itself has the ability to provide some claim details, like access, like I want to access this resource and these are my roles, these are my resource level permissions. It can give all the details in a very concise way so that this comes to your API gateway, it validates it, and if it says, okay, you look right, you're authenticated because you're the right person, plus you have all the authorization to access this API, you're allowed to go ahead. And that's when it gets to the backend API, it serves the request, the client app gets the response back. So that's pretty much the OAuth stance I was referring to. A few more things which we need to look after before we go to the demo. First, the authorization server, which I use Auth0 here. You need to register your API. They give you a month trial period. So you can go ahead and sign up, and then you can create your API in the Auth0. And then you register your app as well. And then you grant the permission of certain resources in this API to these things. Like if you see in the picture, I have created quite a few applications. Some of them I've given read access, some of them read for all the employees because it's an employee API. For some of them, I've given access to read just one employee, depending on the use case. And admin, I've given access to read all or one, whatever it wants. So, but basically, your business case defines what kind of roles you want to create. Scope is where it goes. And that's all you need to register your application. Then you also need a few additional details like your OAuth URL, which is a token URL where you get token from. There's something called JW. Really, not now. Yeah, machine.
Only 15 minutes.
Yeah, you can move
No choice.
down.
Give me that directly and you can restart in the meanwhile. Is that HDMI? I don't have it.
There's a multi-head.
In the meanwhile. So, yeah, so there's something called JSON Web Key Set. So typically these authorization servers, it could have one signature to authenticate a token. It could have multiple signatures to authenticate a token. If you talk about Auth0, they have just one signature. I'll show you once I do the demo, but there are other providers like Azure, which has 3 signatures, and they keep on rotating. So that's why they say key set, because there could be multiple keys used in that particular token to sign. So you need to get all these details to eventually get the token, which we will see in next step. Third and last piece in this demo, which I want to explain, is your Jwt Token Structure. So OAuth is a protocol which defines how you go and get the token and what token can contain, claims, roles, and everything, scopes, how long that token is valid. All these details are inside, captured inside your Jwt token, JWT token. So it's just a concise way of capturing all the information. If you see a Jwt token, inside, it has basically 3 sections, your header, your payload, and the signature part. They're all separated by a dot here, 3 different colors, and it's just a base 64 encoded string. So if you go and pick these pieces and decode them, you're going to see all these things. The header piece tells you what algorithm is used, RSA 256 in this case. Your payload section tells you about the claim you are trying to make. who issued this token, and what was the client name, what was the audience it is trying to access. This is the API where you're trying to access. And then issued at expiry, scope, which I was showing you that for the token I generated, this is for read all, and your grant type is confidential. So these all details, including the signature, is pretty much base 64 encoded in a Jwp token. And now I can show you this whole thing coming together to authenticate a particular request over OAuth. So this is a API proxy which I deployed to support, to basically apply the Jwt policy. Now, again, the whole thing is, in Mule 3, they don't have a JWT policy out of the box. They don't let you validate it. So some cases, people have to write their own JWT policy, a custom policy to do that. In Mule 4, this policy came out of the box. So there are a few things you need to understand to configure the policy, which I'm going to show you right now. Actually, let me show it in this section. So you have to tell you the HTTP bearer header where this Jwt token is coming from, the signing algorithm, which we have seen that we have to, in the JWT token, it also tells you what's the signing key length. Key set is the place where your resource server will go and validate this JWT token. So this is the URL, and in my case, this is my handle, and then .wellknown.json. So I'm going to put all these things maybe in some Git repository where you can go back and refer it. Few more things you want to give is you want to skip the client ID validation. If you want to, you can still enable it. It will just expect you to give a client ID in the form of data weave. So some things you can skip. You are saying I'm validating the audience claim here, and you are saying I want to also validate the expiration claim, and then eventually you are saying, okay, apply this policy to every single API resources and methods. You have a ability to pick and choose if you decide to. If you do this, you give you additional form on selecting which fields you want to apply what. I'm not going to save these configuration and show you how this works. So I have this whole URL to get a token. I do a post on this. So that's my token I received back. I do want to show you the token, how it looks like, somewhere in the same place. So if I put this token here, you will see that which API where this request was issued. It's too small to see. Okay, yeah. So same three sections, header, payload, and signature, and then you get all the details. Now, you can also write a custom policy to see these scopes and write logic on top of that, what you want to do on these scopes. You can say if somebody is coming with read all, I want to give him access to certain things versus someone who comes with read one. So all these additional logic you can write, customize in your API or in the proxy layer, and then it can protect you against people who don't have access to a resource and they're trying to access. So this is the help of the scope field which is accessible upon the policy validation. So I actually wanted to show you a little bit more on this side. So client ID, client secret, which you get when you register your application. And this is the piece I was talking about. So you go here in the Auth 0. So you initially go to API, you register API here, and then you go to permission section and you create some permissions. Whatever permission you want to create, you give here, you give description and add. So all these permissions which you create in the API, they eventually will go and come back in your application layer who wants to access this API. So if you see this, there is the application which I registered by clicking on the link, create new application. And then this is my key, this is my secret. You can go and see that. So you copy all these details, and then if you go to API section, it will tell you that this is the API which it is accessing right now. If I go inside, it will tell me that, okay, I can access just the read all permission, not the other one. I do want to do that, I can do it. So all these things eventually translate into my request, my client ID secret, my audience, which is my API where I've hosted. It could be any unique identifier. It doesn't have to be an exact URL. And then the grant type. So you get all these details. To get the token. And now this is a bearer token which you're using inside making the actual call. So the backend API is pretty simple. It has nothing much in it. But just wanted to show you how this is internally tying up together your OAuth, your JWT, your Auth 0, everything coming together to eventually validate this access token and get your response back. All right. Any questions on the?
Can we know how to debug that policy?
Yes, you can. You have. There are two ways you can do it. You can put a policy to log the messages within the policy request, and I'll show you how you do that in the custom policy, because that's pretty much the use case which I'm doing to log the incoming message. So you can do it that way. The other option is when you get the policy validated and you receive the request in your backend API, you have certain parameters to access these authentication claims. So you can access these authentication claims, and if you want to write it down on API, log, debug, whatever level you want to, you can do it that way.
But this policy is validating in API Manager, right?
Yes.
So do they have any out-of-the-box where we can see the
They don't let you debug in the API Manager. So, and this is pretty much same with the other policies too.
API Manager, you can.
Yeah, this platform, you cannot debug the API policies at this platform, but you can always do it at the back end, but then you have to do this additional stuff which I just talked about. Any more questions around this?
About the signature that required to debug the policy. In your demo, where did we use the signature? It will be in the...
Oh, you mean which signature? Let me go back.
The last portion of it.
When he was editing it, or when he was just simply viewing it?
Simply viewing it, or also...
Are you talking about this thing?
That's the URL.
That's the URL, right?
Right.
You're talking about the JWT signature.
JWT, yeah.
So this is the signature which is used for JWT, and when I call that URL, so actually let me show you the signature as well. So this is the key. So that signature is signed through this key, and this is just one key right now, what you're seeing. So when the resource server, the API side, goes to resource to the authorization server, they know this is signed using this signature.
Oh.
And that ties with the signature where you see here. So if it is tempered in any way, this validation will fail. So it's used internally.
So how did you load that, I guess is what he's asking also.
How did you get the signature here?
That is where I was explaining that. So when you have this handle created, you have this signature currently hosted at this place. Let me go back to the policy one time. Is that what you're talking? Where did I get that? It's in their documentation. They will tell you where you will get it.
Okay.
So you read through the documentation, they will tell you that this is how you get the signature, and the key set URL is where you have to put that so that every request goes there and validates it against that. Yeah.
Okay, so that stays common for all the transactions?
Yes. The signature stays common for all the transactions. That's why some providers have multiple signatures. Azure is one of them. It uses 3 different signatures, and they keep on rotating. So it's hard to guess which signature was used to sign it.
So in that case, you need to, the way in which you configure the signatures would differ when you have 3 different signatures compared to 1?
The URL will still remain same.
Okay.
URL is not going to change. But because there are 3 different signatures, your policy needs to validate against all 3 signatures.
Okay.
That's what it has to do.
So it's going to be a static 3 signatures that you'll be providing?
Yes. So in case of, let's say, Azure, you give one URL. And if you go to that URL, it internally finds 3 signatures, and it knows how to validate that. Like in our case, we have written a custom policy to do exact same thing, and we have to write a code to validate this Jwt token against each signature and see which one works. So if you're doing custom, you have to do it manually. Because Mule4 provides JWT policy out of the box, it does it for you.
Okay. And we lost the display.
Yeah. Oh, really?
Oh, yeah, connection.
It's working, it will work.
Remove it little on the inside.
Okay.
Lose connection.
Maybe if his laptop is up, he can project it. And
Okay, back up. Well, it's kind of wrapping up. This is the last piece which is remaining. Okay, so let's talk about custom policy. The use case is where whatever is coming from default policy is not serving your need. You're free to make your own custom policy. And as I said, for JWT back in Mule 3, we have to create a policy for JWT validation. So anything which is not coming out of the box, you can create your own policy. The way it works in Mule 3 is, and Mule 4 is slightly different, but Mule 3 is you have to create a YAML file, which basically controls what you see on UI. So this whole thing is what YAML file describes. It gives you default values, mandatory and optional, all these things. That information goes in your YAML file. The XML file is the Mule configuration file where you actually write the logic to implement the policy. Once you do all that, and I'll show you a YAML and XML file for the logging policy I created. Once you do all that, you have to upload this policy in API Manager, and then save it, and then you can apply that policy in any API, and it does what you have coded for it. So let me share a different software to add any custom policy, or yes, as long as your logic is compilable enough to run there, you can do it, and you can write the entire Mulesoft. Whatever code logic you have there, you can put it inside. Now it's not that user friendly to write because it's a corner case where you have to do some custom policies. So you need to be a little bit cut paste and all that thing. You write a code and you do a cut paste and you put it inside the policy. So that's how you do it. Let me show you what I meant by that. So this is a YAML file. Now, if you remember the screenshot, it has 2 parameters, one for your mel query, and the other one is for a rejection message. Basically, what it does is you call an API, and let's say API, which I'm hosting, only supports GET. If I call it with POST, it says method not allowed. And let's say as a user, I'm not happy with the message. I want to see a message saying, when you say method not allowed, I would rather prefer to see which message it allows, which particular method I should be calling with rather than a vague message saying method not allowed, because that's a default behavior. So that default behavior is what I'm trying to override to a custom policy. And the way it works is the request comes in, your custom policy executes, and if it gets a get method, it goes to the backend, gets your response, and everything works fine. But if it doesn't work fine, it does not get a get method based on this mel expression, where I'm just checking if the HTTP method is not equal to get, then it sends a message saying this API only supports get. So that's a simple logic. At the same time, in the logging policy .xml, which is where the implementation logic goes, I'm also writing some additional custom headers in the response message. I'm also writing a message in my log with the info level saying, this is the message ID I received. So let me show you something maybe without policy first, and then we will see that with policy. So I have a policy right now. I will disable it. You know what, before I actually do that, I wanted to show you the upload option. So on the left side, you see custom policy button. You do custom policy, you say add custom policy, and that's where you give your policy, you give your YAML file, which is this one, and then you give your XML file, which is this one. So you just give all that, and if everything is parsed well, it will be shown in your policy section. So then you go to your the API where you want to apply custom policy, and in my case it will be grayed out because the policy is already applied, but you should be able to see still. So you see that the logging category and the custom policy. So whatever policy category I give in the YAML file, which is here, you see the category name logging. That's what you see on the API manager. And this is the name of the policy which it will show. And all these expressions, these two fields will also come. So because the policy is not applied right now, if I call this API without policy, so I do a get, I will get a response back. And if I do a post, I just get a method not allowed. And I want to override this behavior by giving a proper message to my user saying, well, you can only do get. So I go back here and I enable the policy. It takes usually, few seconds or maybe sometimes 30, 40 seconds to apply the policy. But if it is applied, we should be able to see a proper message on this side. So get is anyways going to work, and let's see what happens with post. Not yet applied. Okay, so you see the message custom policy, this API only supports get. So now I'm able to override the behavior, which by default says method not allowed. From that, I can see a more meaningful message to my API users. I also wanted to show you the entry in the runtime manager for this particular API, the one which I'm making through info. So if you see this, this is the info which my custom policy is injecting in my logs because of the info line I added in my XML file, something like this. So yes, so this was the part you were asking about how we can put more logging to a policy. Put a custom policy like this, a simple one where you can take the message and log this, or maybe log more entries than what I'm doing right now. And that's how you can see what requests came to your JWT policy or any other policy you want to troubleshoot.
Along with suppose we want to use JWT policy, Along with that, you apply this custom
Yeah.
policy.
And make sure the order is custom policy first and then JWT, because again, the order matters. Yeah. So one last thing I wanted to show about the configuration piece. So the mail expression I gave and the message I gave, so I can change the message based on what I want, different APIs. But end of the day, because the implementation logic says if it's not equal to get, then only this holds true, and it stops that particular request and sends a rejection message back.
What happens to this policy when my instance goes down?
First, it stays there. If your
Policy
instance
stays.
goes down, what will happen is you will see this active to inactive, and that's it.
But will I get a response based on the custom policy that I configure?
No, you won't. Your API manager is not, your auto discovery is not able to communicate with your backend API. So your backend API is down, and this guy doesn't know how to protect it. So it's basically gateway timeout what your users will get.
I thought if the policy still holds good, we can almost pass it.
No, it becomes inactive. Okay. So we have seen the custom policy as well, and that's pretty much.
So when it is generic to the custom policy, so how it is distinguished Mule3 or Mule4? For example, if you write some code snippets inside the policy YAML, how it, there we configure like it is.
I'll show you. So in custom policy, when I say add custom policy, I have to tell over here whether policy event times is older than Mule4 or not. If I do this, that's a different configuration versus if I do this. So this is the phase where it tells, you're telling API manager the policy was built in Mule, anything less than Mule4.
Yeah, my question is like that's okay, but that policy can be applied to Mule3
Right.
free service proxy. I mean to say API. What?
This policy?
Yeah.
No, this won't. This won't. You can't, because in Mule4 the way they do it is differently. They ask you to do some jar files, so you have to upload some jar files in Mule4, and that whole structure is slightly different. I don't know if I can show you. I have that structure as well, but the way Mule4 expects is uploading jar files. They have YAML and XML file as well, but that's a different configuration other than this Mule3. Right. Any questions?